Are we really losing our inheritance over a dog?
My son's shout tore through the meeting room. In the middle of those words, I was holding Buddy tightly in my arms as he trembled. Under the cold fluorescent lights, my chest tightened with a mix of resentment and fear. The rainy streets of Seattle, and the night I first picked up this bloodied little one from the ground, flashed right before my eyes. I had endured, I had been so lonely. But this time I quietly decided I would not run away. Everyone, there really is a moment when a single small choice can change your whole life. Let me tell you now why I picked him up that night. You're listening to Silver Story Tree, where the voices of life's late chapters gently bloom again. Subscribe, like, and turn on the bell to hear more heartfelt stories that grow with time. The dull thud of a fist hitting the table filled the conference room. Downtown Seattle, Washington, in a law firm with floor-to-ceiling windows. A man named Tom, face flushed red, was shouting, "You're telling me we're losing our inheritance because of a dog?" His voice was closer to panic than anger. The woman sitting beside him, Karen, choked back tears as she added her own words. "That broke med student. Some girl with no ties to Seattle whatsoever. We need to find out what she did to my mother-in-law." She twisted the strap of her handbag tightly as she spoke. I sat in the chair across from them, clutching my worn backpack. I held Margaret's silver cane in both hands, head bowed. Through the window, the Seattle downtown skyline stretched out. In the distance, Elliott Bay shimmered faintly. The attorney spoke quietly. "Well then, let's start from the beginning. From the day you first met. From the story about the dog that was lying in the street." As those words fell, I found myself remembering that night a few months ago. It was a winter evening, rain falling gently at the U District bus stop. I was a first-year med student at the University of Washington. And that day I'd been studying late at the campus library like always. I looked down at my soaked sneakers and sighed. My credit card bill flashed through my mind. That's when I saw it. At the far end of the bus stop, a small dog lay collapsed on the ground. The dog was breathing heavily. Its collar was frayed, and the name tag read faintly Buddy, May 17, 2019. I asked the people passing by, "Excuse me, is this your dog?" But everyone just rushed past with their earbuds in, eyes glued to their phones. The rain fell harder, and the dog's breathing grew weaker. Across the street, through a cafe window, an elderly woman in a dark gray coat sat cradling a paper cup of coffee in both hands, watching the scene unfold. That was Margaret. I later learned that she'd muttered to herself, "Right. Then that kid looks just like me back then." I made up my mind. I carefully lifted the dog into my arms. Its small body trembled. Then I started running toward the emergency animal hospital, in the direction of downtown. My phone rattled in my back pocket, and my mobile banking app notification chimed. But I had no time to worry about it. Margaret's eyes apparently lit up at that moment. Inside the cafe, watching rainwater stream down the window. She saw herself from long ago, she later told me. I didn't understand what that meant at the time. When I arrived at the 24-hour emergency animal hospital near downtown Seattle, the receptionist said you'll need to prepay for emergency treatment. With trembling hands, I pulled out my debit card. "Just please save him. I'll find the owner later." The surgery room lights came on. Left alone in the waiting room on a plastic chair, I clutched my wet puffer jacket and shivered. 2 hours from now, I had my overnight shift at the U District convenience store. If I missed work today, I'd lose a day's pay. That's when someone quietly sat down next to me. I turned to see that gray-coated elderly woman from before. She said to me, "Dogs always know first. They know who's going to stay and who's going to leave." I looked at her in surprise, but she just glanced at the emergency consent form and my card receipt. Then stood up without another word. At the time, I didn't know what it meant. A few hours later, Buddy came out safely from surgery. He wagged his tail and nuzzled against my leg. I smiled with relief. "You're okay. Thank God." In that moment, I forgot about credit card bills, rent, and my convenience store shift. When I got back to my U District basement studio, it was 4 a.m. I dried my wet socks in front of the electric heater and recalculated my work schedule and card payments. A sigh escaped me. This month is going to be really tight. The next evening, as I stood behind the counter at the convenience store, a business card landed in front of me. Margaret Holloway, personal companion and driver. $20 per hour. When I looked up, there stood that gray-coated elderly woman from yesterday. If you're the kind of person who knows how to pick up a dog from the street, you can probably walk alongside one old human, right? The elderly woman said with a smile. Half doubting, I looked again at the address on the back of the card. Queen Anne Hill, West Prospect Street. At that moment, a notification popped up on my phone. Rent due tomorrow, automatic reminder. I slipped the card into my pocket, thinking, is this really a good decision? But I didn't have much choice. After that day, my life completely changed. That moment when I picked up a dog led me all the way to this conference room. And now, two people named Tom and Karen were glaring at me. It was a clear Saturday morning after the rain had passed. I climbed Queen Anne Hill in Seattle, slowly, pulling my old coat tight and adjusting my backpack straps as I walked. To the side, Elliott Bay stretched out below. The morning sun glinted brilliantly off the water. A stately red brick mansion came into view. An iron gate and security cameras were installed, and a small nameplate by the doorbell read Holloway Residence. Before pressing the bell, I took another deep breath and thought, is this really okay? I heard the gate opening. At that moment, Buddy came running out first. He grabbed the hem of my jeans and wagged his tail like crazy. Behind him, Margaret came out slowly in her electric wheelchair. Inside the spacious living room, I saw a large wall-mounted TV and an old piano. On one wall hung framed property deeds and titles for downtown Seattle buildings. I glanced at the numbers involuntarily and couldn't look away. They were staggering amounts. I need someone to go to doctor's appointments with me, Margaret said. My kids say they're busy. Everyone in this city seems to be busy. She said it like a joke, but the deep wrinkles around her eyes told a story of loneliness. On the first day accompanying her, I organized Margaret's pill bottles and confirmed clinic appointments. I handled hospital check-ins too. The nurses admired my medical student thoroughness. You're in med school? You'll make a wonderful doctor. I smiled shyly at their words. As I passed through the narrow hallway by the bathroom, I accidentally overheard Tom and Karen's conversation. Once Mom starts slipping mentally, we need to have her redo the will. We need to use the lakefront condo as collateral. Karen spoke in a low voice. My heart sank at those words. I lost sleep for several nights. This isn't my business to get involved in, but this really isn't right. Those thoughts spun around in my head. On my next visit, I carefully turned on my phone's voice recording app. I carried it in my denim jacket pocket, just in case it might help Mrs. Holloway later. I felt uncomfortable, but my instincts kept warning me. As Margaret petted Buddy, she suddenly said Buddy's birthday is May 17th. That number saved me once. The moment I heard that, I remembered the numbers. On the living room safe's keypad. 0517. The more time I spent with Margaret, the more clearly I felt the cracks in this family. Tom and Karen stopped by about once a week, but mostly seemed to come to pick up documents or keys. They barely spent any time making eye contact with Margaret. One evening, Margaret asked me, Emily, why do you want to become a doctor? I hesitated before answering. When I was growing up, my mom was sick but couldn't afford hospital bills. So she just endured it. Watching her, I made a promise. I'd make it so no one has to suffer through pain because of money. Margaret squeezed my hand. Her hand was warm. That's a good reason. Don't lose that feeling. Margaret's voice trembled. In that moment, I realized this elderly woman had also been enduring loneliness. For a long time. As I was leaving that evening, Tom stopped me at the entrance. What exactly do you talk about with my mother? His eyes were cold. I answered as calmly as I could. Just hospital appointments and medication schedules, things like that. Tom took another step closer. You don't think spending time with my mother is going to ease your tuition worries? Do you? At those words, my face burned. But I held back. I'm just working for an hourly wage. Tom stared at me for a while, then turned away. Watching his retreating back, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Fear and anger, and a strange sense of pity. This person is also being chased by something. On the bus ride back to the U-District studio, I stared out the window. Downtown Seattle lights sparkled in the darkness. I thought, what have I gotten myself into? But Margaret's lonely eyes kept coming back to me. Even lying in bed that night, sleep wouldn't come. I kept calculating in my head. Convenience store shifts, tutoring, and now this companion work with Margaret. With this much, I can barely pay next semester's tuition. But that wasn't everything. Should I continue this work or quit? Two choices collided in my mind. But in the end, I climbed Queen Anne Hill the next day and the day after that. The moment when Buddy greeted me, and Margaret opened the door with a smile somehow, I needed that too. A few weeks passed. Before I knew it, I'd become deeply embedded in Margaret's daily routine. Clinic on Tuesday mornings, physical therapy Thursday afternoons, dinner together Friday evenings. Even Buddy would wag his tail the moment he saw me now. It was an overcast afternoon. As Margaret was coming down the front steps, she slipped. With a dull thud, she collapsed to the ground. I screamed and ran to her. Margaret, Margaret. My hands were shaking, but I had to stay calm. The emergency first aid I'd learned in med school flashed through my mind. Check consciousness, check breathing, check for bleeding. I pulled out my phone and called 911. Yes, West Prospect Street, Queen Anne Hill. An elderly woman has fallen down the stairs. The ambulance siren grew closer. I held Margaret's hand tightly. You'll be okay. We'll get to the hospital soon. Margaret's hand pressed weakly against mine. That small pressure gave me relief. In the ambulance to King County Hospital's emergency room, Margaret gripped my hand harder. Don't let go, Emily. Holding back tears, I answered. I won't let go. I'm right here. The moment we arrived in the hospital corridor, Tom appeared. What exactly were you doing with my mother? His voice was full of accusation. She fell while you were there, didn't she? Swallowing my sense of injustice, I said I was just helping her for her appointment time. She slipped coming down the stairs by herself. My voice shook, but I had to tell the truth. Tom's face hardened further. We'll take over from here. You don't need to come back anymore. Karen nodded beside him, looking at me. Her gaze was cold. After that day, my name was removed from the hospital visitor list. Contact through the Guardian network was cut off too. I sat alone in my U-District studio, worry piling up. Is Margaret okay? She must be alone. A few nights later, a text came from an unknown number. Is this Emily Brooks? I'm Olivia Halloway, Margaret's granddaughter. The moment I read the message, my heart dropped. The next afternoon, I met Olivia at a small downtown coffee shop. She was dressed neatly in a suit, befitting a law school student. She spoke calmly. Honestly, I didn't trust you at first either. But I pulled up the hospital CCTV footage. She turned the laptop screen toward me. On the screen was footage of me performing first aid on Margaret after she'd fallen on the stairs. Calling 911, signing consent forms, running through the hallways. There I was, handling everything before her family did. Only Grandma and I have seen this footage. My parents don't know yet. Olivia said carefully. And there's another letter. Grandma wrote it by hand. After she met you. On one side of the letter, written in shaky handwriting. I want to leave this house and Buddy to the person who picked us up from the street. Next to the signature was what looked like an ink paw print from Buddy. Reading the letter, tears came to my eyes. Emily, can I ask you something? Olivia asked carefully. Why did you pick up Buddy that night? Without even knowing how much the hospital bill would be? I thought for a while before answering. I just couldn't walk past. To see a dying life and just keep going, that doesn't match why I want to be a doctor. Money is something you can figure out later. My voice shook, but I meant it. Olivia looked at me for a moment, then nodded. I see. Then we need to reveal the truth now. We're meeting with Grandma's estate attorney. Whether they want to hear it or not, we're going to tell them everything. I folded the letter and made my decision. Okay, then I'll just tell the truth. All of it. Olivia nodded and said that's exactly what Grandma wants. The truth. Walking out of the coffee shop, I looked up at the Seattle sky. Sunlight filtered through the clouds. So it begins. I didn't know what the outcome would be. But at least I wasn't going to regret it. On the bus back to U-District, I stared out the window and thought. I remembered what Margaret had told me. Dogs know first who's going to stay. I was starting to understand what that meant. A few weeks later, a meeting was held in a law firm conference room in a downtown Seattle high-rise. It was a review meeting for Margaret's estate inheritance. Tom and Karen sat with hardened faces, and I sat quietly next to Olivia. The estate attorney spread out documents and began reading the provisions. Mrs. Holloway wishes to leave the Queen Anne residence and 50% of rental property income to Emily Brooks, in appreciation for her dedication and integrity. The moment he heard those words, Tom shot to his feet. So a broke med student picks up a dog, and she gets half the estate? This is insane. The sound of his hand hitting the table echoed through the conference room. Karen raised her voice too. She manipulated an elderly woman. This is elder abuse. We can't let some random girl walk away with our family home. Her voice mixed anger with desperation. At that moment, Olivia handed a USB drive to the attorney. Before we talk about abuse, maybe we should watch this first. From the day Grandma wanted to change her will. Olivia's voice was calm but firm. Hospital corridor CCTV footage played on the conference room monitor. Margaret in her wheelchair appeared on screen, saying that girl did what my own children never did. She showed up when I was on the ground. In the continuing footage, I appeared speaking seriously. Mrs. Holloway, any changes to your will should be made when you're fully aware. And it's entirely your decision. Not because of anyone's pressure. Including mine. Tom's face hardened. Karen looked away. When was this recorded? Tom muttered quietly. The certainty was draining from his voice. The attorney explained quietly. We also have Grandma's handwritten letter, dated the same day. The previous will is on file too. There's no sign of undue influence whatsoever. Legally, this is her clear intent. A suffocating silence fell. Tom said through gritted teeth, fine. Then we'll see you in court. That's when Olivia added, if we go that route. Dad, all your loan documents and those recorded calls with Grandma will be on the record too. Karen's face turned pale. What recordings? Olivia pulled out a tablet to show them. What you told your friends, Mom. That you could pay off your credit card debt with Mom's real estate. It's all there in social media messages. Tom sank into his chair. Karen bit her lip and bowed her head. The attorney said, I think it would be better to return to the negotiating table. If this goes to court, it will only leave wounds for everyone. At that moment, I spoke. I just want to do what Margaret wants. Whether I receive something or not doesn't matter. What matters is what Margaret truly wants. The conference room fell quiet again. Tom looked at me. His eyes held a mix of anger, confusion, and a strange sense of defeat. You really don't want anything? I shook my head. I just want Margaret not to be lonely. That's my wish. My voice trembled, but I meant it. Tom stared at me for a long while, then slowly nodded. After the meeting ended and we stepped into the hallway, Olivia touched my shoulder. You did well. I understand why Grandma chose you. I smiled bitterly. It wasn't really a choice. I just did what needed to be done. Riding down in the elevator. I thought all of this really did start from one dog. If I hadn't picked up Buddy on that rainy night, I wouldn't be here now. Walking through the downtown streets, I looked up at the Seattle sky. Clouds drifted slowly past. I didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was certain, I wouldn't regret this. On the way back to U District, a text came to my phone. It was Olivia. Grandma wants to see you. Can you come to the hospital tomorrow? I smiled and texted back, yes, I'll come. That night lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought I never knew picking up one dog would turn into something this big. But I had no regrets. In fact, I was grateful. The next afternoon, I entered the 6th floor hospital room. At King County Hospital, Margaret sat propped halfway up in bed. When she saw me, she reached out her hand. Emily, you came. Margaret's voice was weak but warm. I held Margaret's hand tightly. You're looking so much better. Margaret smiled and said, I heard you called 911 that day. Tom told me. Thank you. I shook my head. I just did what anyone should do. Outside the window, downtown Seattle was visible. Elliott Bay's waters sparkled in the afternoon sun. Margaret spoke slowly. Emily, there's something I haven't told you. About my younger days. I pulled my chair closer. Margaret looked into the distance and continued. When I was about your age, I was kicked out by my parents too. No money, nowhere to stay. That's when I met a stray dog on the street. That dog kept licking my face. Me, sitting on the sidewalk. Like it was saying, don't give up yet. Tears welled up in Margaret's eyes. That night, I made a promise. I would never treat anyone worse than that dog. I squeezed Margaret's hand tighter. Now I understand why you care so much about Buddy. Margaret nodded. Did you see the date engraved on Buddy's collar? May 17th. That was the day. The day I decided to live again. The hospital room door opened and Olivia came in. Grandma, the attorney, brought the final documents. As Olivia handed over the envelope, Margaret slowly opened it. Then she looked at me and asked Emily, "What do you want?" I hesitated before answering. "I just want you to be happy. The house and money aren't important. As long as you're not lonely." My voice trembled, but I was sincere. Margaret smiled. "That's why I chose you. You didn't want anything. That's exactly the person I was looking for." Margaret picked up a pen and began signing the documents. A few days later, we gathered again in the law firm conference room. This time Tom and Karen's faces were different, closer to resignation than anger. The attorney began reading the final settlement. Mrs. Holloway bequeaths the Queen Anne residence and 50% of rental income to Emily Brooks. The remaining 50% is distributed to her son's family, subject to the following conditions. The attorney's voice filled the room. Condition 1: each year, a portion of rental income will be automatically donated to Seattle animal rescue organizations and low-income medical student scholarships. Condition 2: no additional loans or collateral arrangements may be made in Mrs. Holloway's name. Condition 3: after Mrs. Holloway's passing, a small memorial stone for Buddy will be erected at a Seattle area cemetery, with the inscription to the life picked up from the street, "I leave my home." The attorney set down the documents. Tom remained silent for a long time before speaking. "Emily, I'm sorry for what I said to you. I don't even know why I did that. I was just scared of losing a house again." There was sincerity in his voice. I nodded. "I understand. Everyone has fears. But using someone precious as collateral because of that fear, that's not right." At my words, Tom bowed his head. Karen also spoke carefully. "I'm sorry too. I thought you were manipulating my mother-in-law. But after seeing that footage, I realized you really cared for her." Tears welled in her eyes too. Olivia said, "Now our family can start over. This is what Grandma wanted. For us not to see each other only as money." A brief silence fell over the conference room. The attorney pointed to the signature line. "If everyone agrees, please sign." Tom picked up the pen first. Then Karen, then Olivia signed. Finally, it was my turn. Holding the pen, writing my name, my hand trembled. Emily Brooks. I remembered that day in the rain when I picked up Buddy. I had no idea then that moment would change my life like this. Leaving the conference room, Tom approached me. "Emily, thank you for not taking everything, for being there when I wasn't." He smiled bitterly and added, "I guess that dog did more for this family than I ever did." I shook my head. It wasn't what Buddy did. It was what Margaret did. She showed us how to love. Tom looked at me for a moment, then slowly nodded. Riding down the elevator, Olivia said, "Grandma wants you to come to the Queen Anne house. You're a homeowner now too." I smiled. It still doesn't feel real. Walking through downtown streets, I thought about the true meaning of because of a dog. It wasn't about the dog at all. It was about the attitude toward a fallen life. That's what reveals a person. A few days later, I returned to the Queen Anne mansion. As the iron gate opened, Buddy came running out first. I couldn't help but laugh at how he greeted me, tail wagging like crazy. Margaret walked out slowly with a cane instead of her electric wheelchair. She looked so much better. "Emily, this house is yours too now. Come on in." Margaret's voice was bright. Sitting in the living room drinking tea, Margaret said, "Let me tell you about Tom. I think you should know." I set down my teacup and looked at Margaret. She gazed into the distance and continued. "Tom lost his house during the 2008 financial crisis. He was in his mid-30s and everything disappeared overnight. From that point, Tom became obsessed with real estate. Never again would he lose a house." Margaret's voice lowered. "So it was fear," I murmured. Margaret nodded. "Yes, fear makes people do strange things. Even think about using their mother as collateral. But that's not all Tom is." Olivia sat down next to Margaret. "Grandma, Dad called yesterday. He's starting counseling for financial anxiety." At Olivia's words, Margaret's face brightened. "Really? That's good. I asked Margaret, why did you still leave half to Tom? You could have given me everything. Margaret took my hand. Emily, revenge isn't the solution. Tom was wrong. But I didn't want my final decision to completely destroy my son's life. Fear explains bad choices, but it doesn't excuse them. Still, he's my son. Tears welled in Margaret's eyes. I understood what Margaret meant. She'd chosen realistic healing over perfect justice. Margaret had been thinking far more deeply than I had. Olivia pulled out her tablet to show me. Emily, look at this. Dad and Mom took this photo in Grandma's hospital room yesterday. On screen was Tom and Karen sitting on either side of Margaret. It was the first peaceful family photo in a long time. Dad said he finally sees Mom as a person, not a money source. Olivia's voice trembled. Emily, you saved our family. You really did. I shook my head. It wasn't me. It was Margaret. She had the courage to tell the truth. Margaret smiled and said we both did it. That evening, as I was playing with Buddy in the yard, Tom and Karen came by. When the doorbell rang and I opened the door, the two stood there awkwardly. Come in. At my words, they carefully stepped inside. Sitting on the living room sofa, Tom spoke. Emily, I don't think we properly apologized. I'm truly sorry. I thought you were using my mother. But the truth was the complete opposite. Karen also said I was too harsh with you too. I think it was jealousy. You did for my mother-in-law what I couldn't. Her voice carried genuine feeling. I shook my head. It's okay. I was scared at first too. Going into a stranger's home. Getting caught up in something involving so much money. But getting to know Margaret, I realized it wasn't about money. Tom asked, can I ask honestly? When you first picked up Buddy, did you expect a reward? I thought for a moment before answering. No, I just couldn't pass by a dying life. That's all. Karen wiped away tears. If I'd been in that situation, I would have just walked past. With some excuse about being busy. You're truly a special person. I shook my head, but my heart felt warm. Olivia brought tea from the kitchen. The four of us sat in the living room talking. Tom opened up about 2008. Karen shared about conflicts with her own family. I talked about my struggles as a med student. After talking for several hours, strangely, we understood each other a little better. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but at least we could see each other as human beings. Tom stood and said, Emily, I'll help you manage this house. Tenant issues, repairs, things like that. You focus on your studies. Karen nodded and added, I used to be a real estate agent. So call me anytime you need something. Walking them to the door, I thought people can change when they're free from fear. Watching Tom and Karen get into their car, I smiled quietly. Margaret stood by the window watching. As I approached her, she said, Emily, do you know what the most important thing you did was? You gave our family a second chance. A few weeks later, the final inheritance mediation meeting was held in the mediation room. On the second floor of King County Court. Margaret attended in person in her wheelchair. Olivia pushed the wheelchair, and I walked beside them. The mediation room was cozier than I'd expected. A large table and comfortable chairs. The mediator greeted us and said today's goal is to honor Mrs. Holloway's wishes while causing no further harm to the family. Margaret took a breath and began speaking. I want to give the Queen Anne house and half the rental income to Emily. This child was there when no one else was. Margaret's voice trembled but was resolute. Tom's face flushed as he started to speak. Mom, that house is, but Margaret raised her hand to stop him. I'm not finished. The other half goes to my son's family. But there are conditions. Condition 1. Margaret unfolded the documents. Each year, a portion of the rental income is automatically donated to Seattle Animal Rescue and low-income med student scholarships. This cannot be changed. Condition 2. From now on, no additional loans or collateral. Arrangements can be made in my name. The attorney has already set up all the legal protections. Margaret's voice grew firmer. Condition 3. After I'm gone, a small memorial stone for Buddy will be erected at a Seattle area cemetery. The inscription will read, to the life picked up from the street. I leave my home. Margaret stroked Buddy as she spoke. The mediation room fell quiet. Tom kept his head bowed for a while, then looked at the attorney and Olivia's tear-filled eyes before speaking. If this keeps the family from falling apart, okay. I agree. Karen nodded too. Mother-in-law, I'm sorry. I was too greedy. I understand now. What you want. Sincerity came through in her voice. I exhaled a breath mixing relief and confusion. Is this really for the best? But Margaret smiled and whispered it's enough. For humans, this is already a miracle. Margaret's hand squeezed mine. The mediator organized the papers. Then if everyone agrees, please sign the final documents. One by one we picked up pens. Tom, Karen, Olivia, and finally Margaret and me. Walking out after signing, Olivia said in the courthouse hallway, "Emily, you're officially family now." I smiled awkwardly. I still can't believe it. A few days later, new deed documents were issued at the King County Records Office. Olivia and I went to pick up the papers. On the owner line were two names side by side, Margaret Halloway and Emily Brooks. My hands trembled. This is really my name. Me, who'd been living in a moldy U-District basement, now co-owner of a Queen Anne mansion. Olivia patted my shoulder. Congratulations, Emily. On a bench outside the building, Tom approached carefully. Emily, thank you. For not taking everything. For being there when I wasn't. He smiled bitterly and added, I guess that dog did more for this family than I ever did. I shook my head. Tom, it wasn't Buddy. It was all of us. We chose to see each other as people. Tom looked at me for a moment, then slowly nodded. Karen also approached and said carefully, Emily, would you like to have dinner at our place next week? Olivia will come, and we'll invite Grandma too. A family dinner. I looked at her in surprise. Really? Karen smiled. Really? You're family now too. At those words, I felt like crying, but I held back and nodded. Yes, I'll come. That evening back at the Queen Anne mansion, I told Margaret everything. Margaret smiled and said, see? People can change. You just have to give them a chance. I sat next to Margaret and asked Margaret, don't you regret it, giving half to your son? Margaret shook her head. No. Healing is more important than revenge. That's what I learned. Through the window, Elliott Bay was visible. The water sparkled golden in the sunset light. Buddy rested his chin on my knee and closed his eyes. In that moment, I thought this is family. A few months passed. Spring came to Seattle. In the yard on Queen Anne Hill, grass grew green and cherry blossoms began to bloom. Buddy chased a yellow tennis ball around peacefully. Margaret walked out slowly with her cane, moving on her own. She looked so much better. Emily, could you organize the study? There are too many old documents. Margaret said. Going into the study and organizing drawers, I found an old Polaroid photo. A black and white image. A young Margaret sat on a Seattle downtown sidewalk, holding a small puppy in her arms. On the back of the photo was scrawled, writing 05171975, the day I decided to live. Looking at that date, I felt my breath catch. May 17th. The number engraved on Buddy's collar came to mind. May 17, 2019, and the living room safe password, 0517, and the date Margaret wrote her new will, all the same date. I came out to the living room and showed Margaret the photo. Margaret, is this that day? The day you decided to live again? Margaret looked at the photo and closed her eyes. Yes, that day. Margaret spoke slowly from that day on. I considered the day I was picked up from the sidewalk as my true birthday. It was more important than the day I was born, because it was the day I decided to live. I read again the last line of Margaret's handwritten will hanging on the living room wall. From 0517 on, I consider the day I was picked up from the sidewalk as my true birthday. My fingertips traced the sentence. In that moment I realized the day I picked up Buddy in the rain might have been my true birthday too. It was the day everything changed. Margaret, that day changed my life too. Margaret smiled. That's why I chose you. You're someone like me who can't just walk past a life that's fallen. That's the mark of people who know their true birthday. I heard Buddy barking in the yard. Olivia was getting out of her car. Tom and Karen arrived right after. Today was family gathering day. The day we'd all have dinner together. Sitting around the dinner table, Tom said, Emily, how's school? Med school must be tough, right? I nodded. It's hard, but I'm okay now. I don't have to worry about housing. Karen added, next month we're having a gathering with friends. Would you like to come, Emily? Everyone's curious about you. The med student who saved Grandma. I smiled shyly. Olivia pulled out her phone to show me. Emily, look at this. The Low-Income Med Student Scholarship Foundation website launched. It's called the Emily Brooks Scholarship. My name was displayed prominently on the screen. They're starting to select the first scholarship recipients. For first-generation med students who won't walk past someone on the ground. At Olivia's words, I felt like crying. Margaret took my hand. Dr. Brooks to be, how does it feel to own a house with a crazy old lady and her crazy little dog? I smiled and answered, it feels like we're a real family. News flowed from the television. Seattle Animal Rescue Fund and Low-Income Medical Student Scholarship Foundation established. In one corner of the screen, silhouettes of Margaret, Buddy and me appeared. The moldy U District basement room had already been emptied. Instead, a new flyer hung on the University of Washington campus bulletin board. The Emily Brooks Scholarship for first-generation med students who refused to walk past someone on the ground. That night, standing by the Queen Anne Mansion window, I looked out at the Seattle night view. Downtown lights sparkled as Buddy rested his chin on my knee and closed his eyes. I spoke quietly to myself. What I picked up that night in the Seattle rain wasn't just a dog. It was Margaret's remaining time, my life, and the name we came to share. I never imagined that the number from that street corner would come back to me like this. 0517. That number became the most important day in my life too. The day I decided to live. The day I chose to stay by someone's side. And the day I learned what real family means. Margaret came over and looked out at the night view with me. Emily, the day you picked up Buddy, I was picked up too. You know that, right? I nodded and squeezed Margaret's hand. We stood there for a long while like that. Margaret and me, and Buddy. Under the Seattle night sky, 3 lives held onto each other. A connection that started on the street became a home, became family. After that day, my heart felt a little lighter. No, a lot lighter. Not because I had a house, but because I knew I'd made the right choice. It wasn't because of a dog. I learned that how you treat a fallen life ultimately reveals who you really are. Everyone, have you ever had a moment when your heart just stopped there on the street, like I did? Today, I learned that the choice to pick up a small, breathing life can rebuild my own life and even my name. I also learned that what we must protect before money is our heart and our dignity. Even if we realize it late. It's okay, I want to believe we can always start again. If you've had a similar experience or if any thoughts come to mind, please share them quietly in the comments, so we can be a source of comfort and courage to one another. If my story stayed with you, I'd be grateful if you could subscribe and like, so we can keep walking this road together. And if someone comes to mind who might need this story, please pass this video along to them. Thank you sincerely for listening to the end, and I wish you long-lasting health and peace.